Hey, hello everyone. Thank you for joining today's Tips and Tricks webinar. Today's topic, as you can see, is on our SASE product. Uh, please use the Q&A chat. If you have any questions during the webinar, we'll make sure we get to those. Our presenter today is our solution architect, Chris Rickard. Did I say that right, Chris?
Yeah, it's close enough.
Close enough? Okay. I didn't ask you before. What do you have for us today, Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. So we're going to talk a little bit about Harmony SASE. So we're going to start off with our architecture, and then we're going to jump into the portal, and we'll take a peek at a couple of things there, and then we'll open it up to the floor for questions. So when we look at our architecture, so we're going to be similar to other SASE platforms. There are a couple of unique things about us that we'll talk through. But the product mainly is comprised of two main components. So you're going to have your private access, which is going to be your remote access, so kind of that modernization of VPN or VPN replacement. Then you're going to have the internet access, which is going to be the security aspect of it. So that's where, people would consider it maybe firewall as a service, so content filtering, malware detection, those types of things. And then we have a third component that's sitting in there, which is our SaaS security. And what that piece of it does is it ties into your different SaaS applications, so your Microsofts, Salesforce, Google, those types of platforms, and looks for configuration issues as well as malicious communications or different activities within those platforms. We're also looking at different integrations that have been added into them, either by administrators or by users, where they could be a little bit overly permissive, or they could potentially, it be connections that administrators do not want into the platform. And then we, of course, have ability to do different remediations as part of that. Now, when we look back on the SASE end of it, um, we do support pretty much every major operating system out there. So Windows, Mac, Linux. We also have a Chromebooks agent. Have a mobile client for iOS and Android. We use both Harmony Mobile, which is our mobile threat defense, and then we have a separate agent that is just the private access. So if we're wanting to secure both the device and provide private access, we do have a client that does both. If we're only looking at private access, we have a client that does that just by itself. And then we also have an agentless component. So that would be where a user or maybe even a contractor would browse to a web page. They'll log in, and then they'll be presented with a list of applications that they're allowed to access. So that could be RDP sessions, could be web sessions, VNC, any of those types of connections, SSH, they would be able to use that web session. Now, when we look at connectivity, we are going to have a couple of different ways that we can do it. So when we look at connecting into the infrastructure, that first one is going to be an IPsec tunnel. So what that will do is it will create a tunnel between our SASE cloud and your on-premise system. So be it a data center, be it cloud infrastructure, either of those two. And then the other one is going to be WireGuard. So in that case, it's going to be a lightweight Linux server. Generally speaking, we just do an Ubuntu server, and then we'll give you a script that will establish that WireGuard tunnel. They both have pros and cons to them, which we'll kind of talk through in a little bit. But those are the two main connections. We also support OpenVPN, but to be honest with you, I'm not sure anybody's configured that recently. Usually it's IPsec or WireGuard. And then for us, like most SASE, we are fully identity centric, meaning that we are going to identify who the user is, and then based on that identity or groups, we're going to then allow or deny access to different resources within the system. And then lastly, from the administrator side, we do have the ability to send all logs. We have direct integrations with Splunk as well as with Microsoft. For anything else, like your Rapid7s or anything stuff in the world, we do have the ability to send logs to an S3 bucket. And then generally speaking, those guys could ingest logs from there and kind of proceed through it. So with that, I didn't want to spend a whole bunch of time in slides. I think it's a little bit more fun to dive into the platform a little bit. So for those of you who are maybe less familiar with the Infinity Portal, that is what we are looking at here. That is Checkpoint's one-stop shopping for all management. So you can see the security operations and AI side of it over here, quantum side for firewalling, IoT, SD-WAN, CloudGuard for the cloud offerings that we have, and then Harmony for the workspace. So that is where SASE lives, and then as well as several other products that the Checkpoint makes. So in our case, we're going to be looking at SASE. So within here is our main dashboard. So this is going to have any of your active sessions, kind of the way that your licenses are broken out. So gateways that are licensed as well as utilized, members that we have. So in our world, licenses are named users. So once a user is onto the system, they've authenticated, they consume a license. We can easily remove those if we need to. If we need to balance out licenses here and there, we could remove users or shift them around a little bit. But generally speaking, once a user is authenticated, it consumes the license. Applications is going to be our clientless connectivity. So that's a number of published applications that you've done for this particular tenant. Now, for us, everything, like I mentioned, is going to start with a network. So I have a couple of different ones in here. I have this one up here, and then I have our new enhanced network that we're in the process of releasing. So this should come out around Q3. This one is really nice because what it will do is it will give you a landing point. So in my case, I have two different regions, so West Coast out in LA, and then Chicago here on my side, being in Indiana. And then within that, you'll end up with scale units. So the general rule of thumb for us is that for every 100 concurrent users, it would need one gateway to be able to scale and service that. So each gateway can do roughly 1 gig up and down, and that roughly translates to 100 users concurrently. So in this case, you're going to set your region, and then the number of scale units will go into that. So a scale unit is a gateway. So this is going to be your landing point for your VPN tunnel. You can see that I have a corporate one. So this is going to a Checkpoint gateway. And then I have another one going into Azure. So these are two HA tunnels that are being built into those two different infrastructures. And then you can easily add scale units up and down. So you can take it away from LA and give it to Chicago if things start to shift in your world and you need to, adjust it there. But they're very easy to continuously add scale units to be able to build out if you need. Now, the good thing is that for each 100 licenses that are purchased, we provide a gateway. So generally speaking, it's enough for most customers. If not, you can certainly buy one just individually. They're very inexpensive. I want to say they're like $500 or $600 for the year MSRP. So it's not terribly difficult. Now, a couple of things that you would want to do when you're planning this part of it out. Thing number one is that we need to define what the internal SASE subnet is going to be. So this is what we as the SASE end are going to provide to the client. So that IP address that we're going to provide to them. And then we're going to use that as well for some internal routing that we have within the infrastructure itself. So a couple of things to consider. We support all of the private address spaces. So the 10, the 172.16, and then the 192.168 networks. So you'll want to ensure that you're not overlapping this with anything that's already internal to the system. So we can't have overlapping address spaces. So when you're planning that out, you do want to make sure that we're using a network that isn't already defined in the system. The other thing that we need to make consideration on is that CIDR here. So by default, it's going to be a /16. We can go up to a /21. But you'll need to make considerations in that because that directly correlates to the number of gateways that the SASE network can provide. So I know a lot of customers like to do the lowest CIDR range possible. If we do that, though, then we're likely going to reduce the total number of gateways that this network that I have here can support. So when we're planning that out, and this is all in documentation, we can certainly share that as well. But when we're planning this out, we want to ensure that we create the network in a way that is going to handle the number of gateways that we need to be able to handle the user base that we're putting on the network. So again, first part is ensuring that the subnet is not overlapping. Second part is making sure that the CIDR is set at a range that allows us to have enough gateways to service the client base that we have. The other couple of things in here to consider, and I was talking about this a little bit, is the split tunneling. So one thing that is unique to us that nobody else does is that we took a hybrid approach to the security side of it. So in our world, all security services happen on our agent itself. So that means that we took a slight trade-off on CPU in lieu of performance increases within the network and cost savings because we're not funneling all internet-bound traffic out our gateways. The result of that, we're able to save on compute and we're able to save in bandwidth because we're using the user's ISP to be able to do internet-bound traffic. And we still have the same security services, so your content filtering, malware, threat emulation, anti-bot, but all of those are happening at the agent level. Generally speaking, we see 1 to 2% CPU trade-off on the machine to be able to do that, but the cost savings just in bandwidth alone is well worth that trade-off. It's a better user experience for your users. They're going to get true localized results. So rather than, in my case, I'm in Indiana, so my closest pop is Chicago. So if I'm with one of our competitors and I'm online, localized results are going to be Chicago because that's where I'm coming out of. For us, it is going to show in Indiana because we're not having to dump all that traffic out there. So better performance, they're going to get near whatever their ISP is. So if it's 500 meg, they're going to be awful close to that. And then cost savings because again, we're not sending all that traffic out. Now, the reason I mention this is you are going to have some cases where you may need that traffic to come out of one of our gateways because you're doing IP whitelisting. So in that case, what we can do is we can say, we're going to go ahead and tunnel all of our private data out of that cloud gateway because we needed to do that and ride the IPsec tunnel down. However, we also need a couple of other things, right? So you can put in your domains, your subnets, or whatever you need us to send down our gateway. That way you can still do IP whitelisting. So you can still whitelist our IP in here. We'll send all that traffic then down the tunnel to come out of our gateway so that the IP whitelisting still functions. So you'll see this a lot in government in particular because most of those sites require IP whitelisting and reliable IP. So that way we can still kind of serve the speed and performance through the hybrid, but we can also send traffic down the line to ensure that it comes out of a reliable IP address. Now, as we're talking about IP addresses, the other nice thing about our product is that we do static IPs for all of our gateways. Everything that we have is hosted in private data centers, so we're not sitting in the public systems, so the Azure AWSs. And the reason is that we like to be able to transfer ownership of those IPs to you as the customer while you're using the platform. So all of our gateways are statically assigned. It's no additional cost for that. You're going to get a static IP address, and you can use that for the duration of the contract, and as long as you have the gateway up and running. Usually, if you remove a gateway and add it back quick enough, you're going to get that same IP address, but it could be an occasion where the IP is gonna flip, depending upon the speed in which you get that brought back up. The other thing to consider is private DNS. So you can also add in your private DNS servers and your search domains. That way we can do name resolution within the SASE network. So that way You can both do configuration based on FUDN, and users can still, get reliable queries back when they're on our network and looking for something internal to the domain there. So that's another thing that you can do, is add that in there so that name resolution works correctly. So a couple of other things that we would want to do when we were looking at zero trust in particular, right? We're always trust nothing, verify everything, is going to come down to posture checks. So we have posture checks that we're going to do on the machine. We're going to do that prior to connection, and then we're going to do it every 20, 40, or 60 minutes thereafter. So there are some checks that are going to be near instantaneous. So endpoint, for example, that is going to be near instantaneous. If this were to go down, or were to, a bunch of blades, at least on the checkpoint side, were to fail, we're immediately going to get access to the network. There are going to be other posture checks, though, for an example, like a registry entry, a file exists, those types of things. Those are going to follow that, every 20 minute or 40, whatever you set at it. And we do support pretty much all of the major players in there. So, you don't, well, obviously I'd love for you to be all in a checkpoint, but that's not the real world. So, we do support pretty much all of them. We can look at AD association. We can look at, like I said, different registry keys. The AD association is going to be regular Active Directory, but we can use a registry entry to look for intra association. So if you're in a hybrid, or if you're domain, you're all in on intra, we do have the ability to look at a registry key and validate that machine is domain joined through intra. And we support the same thing for Mac. So most of those same features are going to exist in there. And then on the iOS and Android side, it's either going to be an allow or deny. We do have the ability to do posture checking when we're using Harmony Mobile. So we'll use Harmony Mobile's risk assessment to help us decide if a remote device, or a iOS or Android device, should be allowed to connect to the infrastructure. Then from there, we're going to look at different rules that we want to do. So we've got our users in there, we've got our network defined. Now we're going to decide how do we want to slice this up. So generally, your source is going to be your user or a group. Destination will be a subnet or a device. So in this case, I have checkpoint devs that are doing some work on our enhanced network and my gateway. So they've been granted access to my management over HTTPS. This tenant serves Harmony Browse demos for quite a bit of the overlays and some of the sales guys. So they're in a sales group. They're able to access the demo machine over RDP. So you can see how you start to pare back some of that access to we're getting a little bit more to least privilege. So now we've verified the user, we've verified the machine is good. Now we're going to start to grant access from there. One thing to watch, and it irritates me a touch, I'm working on them getting to change it. By default, when you set this up, it is a default accept. So that means that if you don't pay attention to this and you go through and you say, oh, I'm going to add this accept here, this accept here, and then you get to testing and see, if users can access things they shouldn't, they're going to be able to access things they shouldn't because we've got a default accept up here. So the first thing that you'll want to do, change that to default deny, and then start to poke holes in it from there. The other thing that we would look at is the clientless application. So anything that you have set up in here, you can define who can use it. So this is really good for contractors or unmanaged devices. Or, that break class in case of emergency, you're out on vacation, you don't have your work laptop, you need to be able to get into, to SSH into something or hit a jump box to be able to resolve an issue. You could use it for that as well. But in this case, user, contractor, whomever would hit a web page, they'll authenticate in, and then they'll be presented with a list of applications that they are allowed to access. So a couple of different ways that you could go through that. you can, if we're doing the web, then you can set a authentication. So in that case, we're going to pass those credentials through. So a good example is, let's say we have a contractor, we allow them onto the clientless side of it, but what we don't want to do is reveal the credentials used to be able to get into the network. In that case, we can hit this toggle on, we can pre-fill the authentication in. Now they have a localized account they use to log into our system with, and then we pass those AD credentials through so they never know what they are. So that way you can kind of keep it semi-safe from there. And then from there, you would just define who has access to it. So, down to the user level or different groups, however you want to do that, they'll be able to get in, authenticate, and process through. Now, you may also want to put some guardrails around that. So you may want to say, for you to be able to use the clientless, you need to exist in this group. You need to come from, this country or that country. You can only use it during a certain date and time. It needs to be a minimum browser version number. It needs to be a minimum OS version number. You can start to put a little bit of guardrails even around the clientless side to where it's not just unfettered access whenever they want from wherever they want. You could even lock it down to a particular IP. So if you're saying, Mr. Contractor, you can only access this when I know you're in your office behind all your other security, it has to originate from this IP for you to be able to get into that system. A couple other things that we'll touch on is the identity providers. So we do want to be able to get an identity provider in there so that we can identify who the users are. So a couple of cool things with this, we actually support multiple identity providers. So if you're a company that does a lot of acquisitions, and you make an acquisition of a company, they're sitting in Intra, you're like, man, we really need to get them into our system as quick as possible. All we have to do is add them again. We'll add another Microsoft identity provider in here, set up SCIM so we auto provision the people that you need, and boom, they're on the system. They can start accessing things. You give them the client, you hit the client list, whatever you want to do, instantly be able to get them into the system. We also support localized accounts. So if you want to create localized users, we would call them database accounts. And you could do that as well. That would be the system here. And then we can enable two-factor with that as well. You can double two-factor here if you want. I don't really recommend it. Most customers will have set some level of conditional access within Intra. My preference is to follow that. If you don't have conditional access policies, or you want us to hit another factor even after conditional access is run through, you could certainly turn it on. But I'd say most of the time it's good to not have to kind of do that. Internet access wise, so this is the security side of it. Again, your source is going to be your destination or your users or your groups. Destination is going to be either web category or potential application. So if you're saying that, we're going to deny, let's say, all file storage, but you want to do an allow on Dropbox. So what we could do is we could set a default drop for all file storage, and then an allow at the application level for Dropbox. That way you don't have to go through all their URLs and everything that would be needed. Should be nearly the full application library that you're used to Checkpoint, so north of 10,000 different applications that exist in there. You can also do denies for those as well. You can even configure a time. So maybe you have the marketing department that you want to be able to be on Facebook, but you want to allow them, but maybe over lunch you want to allow users to be able to access social media or something like that. So you could do a timed session where they can access certain things during certain times, and then the rest of the time they're not allowed to be able to do that. Last little bit in here is the logging. So active sessions are going to show anybody that's on the system, whether it is clientless, which is what the case of this one is, or client base, which is what the case of this one is. Member activity is going to be anything that the member has done. So if they've logged into something, they logged out of something, they've accessed something, whatever interaction they've had with the system, it's going to be logged in there. Web activity is going to be anything that we have denied. So anything that we've needed to take action on. Same for malware protection. And then we've also added the ability to do a unified log. So now this takes the security sides of it. So firewall, denies or allows, web blocks, all that stuff, all unified into the unified view. And again, all of this can be exported to a SIM so that it can all be logged and tracked within there. We are adding the ability to do custom notification pages. So you could upload your company logo. You could, type in the verbiage that you want. And then when they go to a page they shouldn't, they're going to get a customized response from you guys. So, could say if you reach this page in error, contact the help desk or, whatever you want to write in there. That kind of takes us to the top. So we'll maybe hand it back off to Robert, maybe go through a couple of questions and go from there.
Yep, and we do have some questions for you. I think you answered some of them through your prezo, but let's see. Anthony asks, split tunneling only works for HTTPS, correct? Question.
So the split tunneling, when you define it at the network layer, it is going to be anything that is HTTPS. Otherwise, when it's sitting at the agent level, any internet bound traffic is going to go out the user's ISP.
Fine.
But yeah, the pre-configured, yes, HTTPS.
While you're there on networks, can you go through again the difference between what'd you call it? Enhanced is coming out, you said. What's the difference between the two networks that you showed earlier?
Yeah, so the difference would be, so if we look at the other network, so this network here, in that case, you're going to pick a region and then you're going to pick a gateway and then you're going to create a tunnel. So when we look at it like this, Chicago 2 could have multiple gateways under it. And then you would, be able to do your HA tunnels between, I only have the one in here, but you could do HA tunnels between these two gateways. But if you needed to continuously scale up, or if maintenance needed to be done on one gateway, or you had to move around or whatever, it's only going to be those two gateways that you have in there that own the tunnel. Whereas on the enhanced network side, it is going to be the landing point that owns the tunnel, and then we distribute it to the scale units below it. So if a gateway were to go down on the we call it core v3, so if it were to go down on that one, that tunnel just drops. If it goes down one of the gateways, we lose one of the gateways in the scale unit, and let's say you have 4 of them in here, we're just going to move it to the next gateway. So it allows for dynamic adjustment, so that way you're not, you're not necessarily sitting in a failure point. And then we have redundancy built within this primary landing point as well. But it really affords quite a bit more flexibility with the tunnel creation and where we kind of move stuff around in the system. All that's happening on the back end that you don't have to deal with, but it'll allow a ton more flexibility. You'll have a single IP address where you can do the redundant tunnels and everything instead of multiple. Makes it a lot more seamless for tunnel creation and management, especially in the fault tolerance range.
Great. Well, we got another question on the gateway here. So when you add a new gateway, do you have to configure the new gateway from scratch, like the initial setup, or does it use the backbone IPsec that is already configured back to HQ?
Yeah, so in the enhanced network, if you add a gateway, we auto provision it. So it becomes aware of everything that it would need to become aware of. On the V3 version, if you added a gateway, there's no configuration that would need to be done. It will understand everything, but if you want to use that gateway in a tunnel, you would have to configure it. So if you added a second gateway here and you wanted it it to also support a IPsec tunnel or a connector, you would have to manually configure that. Otherwise, the gateway would show up below this, and then we have a tier 1 private backbone. So if anybody connected to that gateway, it would ride that backbone down, hit the one with the tunnel, and then provide the resource. In the enhanced network, the second that you add it, we will auto load balance between everything on the back end.
Great. Another question here. If we want to restrict traffic via port to public IP, we have to put it in private access question. How would we send that traffic to the Harmony Gateway if not private access? Did you follow that one?
Yeah, so if you wanted it to come out our gateway, it would come down to those split tunneling rules to where you could either do subnet address or FQDN to be able to send it out our gateway. If it's internet access only, we don't normally sell gateways with it. However, you could. And then if you purchased a gateway as part of that, then we could do a kind of similar to what we're doing now, where we would configure what we want to be sent down the gateway. It just, there would be no IPsec tunnels configured on that end, but then at that point we would start to send traffic down the gateway. So you do have the ability to leverage gateways when you're using it. The reason that we don't normally do that is because the security features are all done on the agent base. But yeah, you could, even in the internet access, you could add gateways into the system, and then you could do this same thing that we're doing now, where we're going to say, you know, all internet traffic is going to go out with the exception of these ranges or whatever needed to go out. So even just in internet access, you could still do the same effect.
Perfect. I think that covered the questions. Please type quickly if you have any more, but I'll start our outro here. Let's see. Well, thank you, Chris. Great information. As always, we'll send a follow-up email with any reference content and the recording link to this session. Our next webinar will be in 2 weeks. You'll see the invitation for that soon. No more questions. So wait, I spoke too soon. I think I got one. Is there a way to not take a license when provisioning users via Entra? Is there a way to not take a license when provisioning users through Entra via Entra?
Yeah, so the auto provision will not necessarily consume a license until the user authenticates. So once that user has authenticated into the system, it is going to eat a license. So if they just exist in the system, we can kind of finagle it to where they don't need a license. Once they've authenticated into the system, they're going to eat the license. But we can go through there and you can do scripting through APIs and other stuff that to where we could deprovision them in effect. But ideally, if you're going to be provisioning people into the system, we would want to do that either via a group or something to where you know that they're going to be on the system, right? We wouldn't necessarily want to provision the entire company if they're not going to use it. We would create a kind of like what you would do now for VPN, right? Generally speaking, there's a group that that would be allowed to access the VPN, and you would put the users in there. Same kind of concept for us. Ideally, we would do through Skin, where we provision a group that has users that are known to be using it.
Okay, person who asked that question did say that no one auth and my licenses are taken. So Anthony, let's take this offline. Maybe there's some details we're missing for you, but if you want, shoot me an email. I'll do the same, and we'll find the right resource for you and make sure we get you the right answers. Maybe something specific with your install. What is best practice for the default deny all rule? Is that your first rule or your last rule?
For the remote access, it would be so when the network is spun up and the firewall is enabled, so by default, when you create a network, the firewall is off. And in that case, it's effectively just wide open. So there's no drops or anything. It's just, we're going to let you do whatever you want to do once you're on it. Once the firewall is enabled, by default, we enable it as an accept. So I don't like that. I would tell you to move it to drop. And then from there, you'll start to poke holes in it. So normally when we do a POC or we start out, we leave the firewall off in the beginning because I don't want anything in the way. I want to understand that we've got it functioning correctly. The IPsec tunnels are working. The firewall is correctly configured to allow access. Once we've got that, then at that point we'll enable the firewall. I move it to drop, and then we start to kind of poke holes in it. So not necessarily a best practice, but right out of the gate, we usually leave the firewall off, verify that things are working, traffic is passing, people can access things, in a limited scope with, maybe just the IT folks or, a small test bed of users. Once we feel comfortable that things are working, at that point, we'll enable the firewall, move it to drop, and then we'll start to kind of parse it down. You could certainly leave it as accept and then do the opposite of this. But generally speaking, it's easier to leave it as a default deny and then start to allow access as needed.
Got it. All right, I got one more for you unless they keep typing. Can you show the agentless portal? Can you show an agentless portal sample layout? I don't know if
Yeah,
you have that
let
handy
me,
or
let me share again.
see how good you are on the fly here, Chris.
There you go. So, um, yep, so that would be the agentless access portal. So user would log in. In my case, I still have it enabled for private access, so they could actually download the agent if needed. But yeah, they'll see all the different applications that are published to them. They could pop right into those. In this case, this one is passing authentication through. So they wouldn't know what the account is. But yeah, uh, everything is going to happen in the web browser, with the exception if you do native RDP. In that case, what will happen is a download will occur, which is the download link. They'll be able to click on that. So you'll want to use that in the world where a user might need dual monitors, right? Because we can't replicate that in web, but we can in the native. So in that case, it will give you the dual monitor and some of the more stuff that you would have um, with the native application. But yeah, it's simple as that. So there's a whole list of applications that are sitting in here. So you can see all of them as I kind of scroll through them. In this case, there's only a subset that this particular user has access to.
All right. Another question back on that default deny all rule he added. Um, the reason I ask is on my POC, I enabled the firewall, but when I have the first rule drop, nothing works unless I move the drop to the last rule. So
Oh, okay, yeah. So you're
is it order of operations? I mean, what
yeah, yeah,
is
absolutely, yeah. So if you're not doing it at this level, so if you've done an accept and you've come in here and you've done a any kind of drop, yeah, it's going to hit this and process first. It's going to see that sources everything, any sees this drop, so it's going to drop everything. It would be better to do it up at this level, and then start to add holes into it. So if you toggle this one to drop rather than accept, that's my assumption is that it's set to accept. You've got an any drop here, and then yeah, it's going to be order a process just like any other firewall.
yeah.
So it's going to hit that that match of all innies and drop it, and then the rules below it won't matter.
All right. Just responded, makes sense now. So good
Yeah,
answer.
of course.
All right, let me check one more time. You got a thank you. All right, I think that covers it. So again, thanks everyone for joining. We'll send that reference follow-up email with the reference content and recording link, and we'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Chris, thanks again for everything, and everyone else, we'll see you next time. Enjoy your
Awesome.
day.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
all. See ya.